Have Illustrator open up. We're gonna go back, make a new file, and then we'll enter our details manually again. So we're gonna change points to inches, and width will be 11 inches, height 17. This is the portrait orientation tabloid size, and we'll just keep it with one artboard. We will not be printing this, so let's change this to RGB color and raster effects to screen, which is 72. Okay, so 11, 17, one artboard, RGB, and screen. And then press create. Okay. And again, I always use the Essentials Classic workspace, which has a few more tools around. So if you go up to Window, Workspace, click on Essentials Classic so that your screen looks like mine, and it's easier to follow along. So first off, I'm going to just kind of show the basic layout for the flags. I am going to let you choose your dimensions for the flag. You know, some flags are more square, some are even like a extended triangle, like a thin triangle. I would recommend keeping all three the same just so it's nice and neat on your artboard. So I can start off with something like the rectangle tool, and remember, if I click on layers, I have one layer. If I make an approximate flag shape, I'm going to swap the fill and stroke so that it's just a solid black fill shape. I can move it around. I'm going to make another layer. So under my layers tab, the little square with a plus symbol, just create new layer. And then I can copy and paste this shape using my keyboard shortcuts, Command C to copy, or if you go up to Edit and press Copy here. Then if I click on Layer 2 and I press to paste, which is Command V, or again you can go up to Edit and press Paste. Then paste that shape on Layer 2. I can do the same thing with Layer 3 and paste it again. And your artboard that you submit will look something like this. Now, you may still want to have these a little bit smaller so that you have a little more room for writing maybe underneath each flag. In this case, I haven't started designing yet, but what you can do is you can select. I'm using my selection tool, just clicking and dragging a selection box to select all three at the same time. Then if I hold Shift and Option down at the same time and click, first I need to bring my cursor over to the corner and click and drag this down. It'll make all three smaller proportionally. Then I can move them up and down. This is too small, but now I have plenty of room underneath each one for having your short description. To have things nice and neat, there's a couple different ways that you can align the objects perfectly within your artboard in relation to each other and the artboard. So for instance, now I do have smart guides turned on. So you see as I'm moving this around, see this kind of magenta line? If I get it close to lining up with this one, you'll see that it kind of snaps into place and it's perfectly in line. This is definitely helpful. Also, if I grab my third one and I get it close, you'll see right here, actually no, that did not work. Oh yeah, right here, it is recognizing that the space between this one I'm moving is now the exact same spacing between that and the one above it. So just by using smart guides, you can get these lined up perfectly. Now, sometimes you don't want things to snap in place. You want to have a little more control of how you move things around. Another tool that you need to get used to, or at least just be aware of, is the align tool. So up at the top, see where it says align? Click on that, and then you have a bunch of different options that will align things perfectly. So first off, you can align to artboard, align to selection. So these are out of place right now, right? If I click and drag and select all three of these, and then go to align, and I have this as align to selection, this is my selection, these three rectangles, I can align objects to the center, to the left, or to the right. Even vertically, top, center, or bottom. So in this case, see the difference when I align to the left? They snap to the furthest left side of the left shape. Let me press Command Z to undo. That's weird. If I align to the center, it centers all of them. And to the right, does the same thing. You can mess around with this. Alvin? Great, you found us. Okay. I can do the same thing vertically. If I align to the top, it scrunches all of them to the very top, which is not something we want. Or the center, and you get the idea of what it's doing there. Now, in addition to aligning, you can distribute objects evenly. So actually, let's say they're aligned. Let's go ahead and align them in the center. But, just as an example, I'm going to make a few more of these. And the spacing between some of these is all off. If I select all of them, go to Align, and then distribute, for example, vertical distribute center, click on this, and now automatically the spacing between each object is perfectly the same. So using the Align tool is a good way to make sure all of your objects, in this case flags, are perfectly aligned and centered and placed on your artboard. So with my selection tool, which is keyboard shortcut V, I'm just clicking somewhere outside the shapes and clicking, and it makes this selection area. You can see the little dotted line, and I'm just dragging it over all the shapes I want to select, and then I let go and it selects everything within that selection area. It does not. And actually you can see, it may be hard to see on the projector, see these colors for each layer here, blue, red, and green? They correspond to, you can see the little bounding box around each of these rectangles. This one, you can barely see it, it's green, this one's red, this one's blue here. So I know which one is on which layer based off of which color of the bounding box comes up when I click on it. Red, green. And then the more layers I make, let me put some objects on there. Okay, that one does blue again. This one does magenta. Sometimes it'll be yellow. And you can also change the color, but that's not really important for right now. But yes, it does not matter what layer it's on. If you make a selection area, it will select anything that is not locked. So if you remember from last class, I can select the different layers and lock them. Now if I make a selection box over it, it only selects this layer because these other two are locked, and this one is not. in the assignment description, I have included a handy website called coolers.co. It's, you don't have to use this. It just, it can be a way of finding cool color palettes. You can press start the generator, and then it's going to usually want to take you through this tutorial thing. But I'm pressing spacebar and I can get different color palettes, and then I can, let's say I like this one, the magenta. If I lock it, then it stays the same, and I can keep shuffling through until I find another color I like. And you can eventually get a color palette. That's an option just to maybe spark some interest. You can also, I think on their webpage, they have a explore trending palettes. So you can find maybe other color palettes that are relevant to what you're going for. What I would do is screenshot this palette and just bring it into Illustrator. Now, you can copy what's called the hex code from each one. So, and this is getting a little more advanced, so don't worry if it's not following along. But if you notice, when you pick the color of an object, you see this little code right here. This is called a hex code. So I copied and I'm pasting the code from which one did I do? I think I did this one. This blue right here. I'm pasting that code in there. Press OK, and it automatically makes the same color. Now that's an option you can do. Something else that may just be easier is screenshotting. So on Mac computers, and this is going to be different if you're using Windows on your own laptop. If you press Command-Shift-4, you'll get these little crosshairs. You can click and drag across here. It'll screenshot this selection. It'll go to your desktop. So this is a screenshot, and I can actually click and drag this over to Illustrator. So this is my Finder. I'm looking at my desktop with my file here. I have Illustrator in the background. I can click and drag it over to Illustrator, and it drops the palette right here. Now I can use the eyedropper tool, which looks like this. Looks like an eyedropper or keyboard shortcut I. I can first select this object, and then press I, and then I'm going to choose this more orangey reddish color, and it'll automatically, your computers might want you to accept that. Just turn this on. Oh man, okay. Yeah, maybe you don't have to. And then it should be able to change the color of your shape just by your screenshot. You can actually do this with any screenshot. Even other photos. This is actually a pretty cool sunset color palette. Let's say you find something like this that you like, and you don't even have to download it. I'm just going to take another screenshot just right here. It's going to pop up on my desktop. If I drag it over to Illustrator, let's say I want this top one. Click the eyedropper. I can select the blue in the sky, and the next one will be kind of this orangey yellow, and then the next one will be this kind of pink or purplish, maybe a little bit more like that. It's actually not a bad color palette. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so your color palettes are going to be relevant to your design and what they symbolize. Okay? Since we were discussing text earlier, let's go ahead and use a text tool, the type tool. I'm just go ahead and make one more layer that I'll put all my text on, layer 4. Command plus zooms in, and then I can use a space bar, make the move hand. I can drag it around here. All right, type tool is the letter T right here. It's also keyboard shortcut T. If I click on that, I can make a text box in between these shapes. Now you have to be careful. Where this layer unlocked, see if how my cursor changes to the circle if I get too close. If I do that, it puts text in that shape, which I do not want. Sometimes that's helpful. That's why it's helpful to lock these layers, and then it won't do that. So now see, I've locked these 3 layers, and now that cursor doesn't change. I don't have to worry about it accidentally filling my shape with text. So I can click and drag a text box underneath this flag. And then this is just where you're going to type in a very brief description that's explaining your design choices. You know, the green represents my love of nature. I don't know, whatever it is. That is a text tool. That's how you'll be putting text onto your artboard. Now, once you do that, you can click on it, and you'll have options to change the size, to change the typeface. Right now, you're going to look for the character window. I see it over here. If you don't see it, come up to Window and click on, or go down to Type and then click on Character. So this is where I can change the size, text size. This is where I can change. Up here right now is Myriad Pro. I'm going to change it to Helvetica. Please don't do something like a crazy typeface. Just keep it simple, please. You're just describing your design choices. You don't have to do something that's, you know, too fun, you know. Okay. And of course, just like your shapes, you can change the color of text. So if I don't want it so starkly pure black, like maybe I want it like a kind of like a charcoal gray, or maybe you want a bright red. I don't know if you really want a bright red for this project because it might clash with your flags, but you can change the color of your text just like every other object. For this demo, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Because now we're getting into shape building. There's different ways to build more complex shapes. Obviously, the pen tool, which we've begun to look at, is a great starting point. But let me actually put a diagonal in here. So I have this one here. This is on layer 1. I mean, there's so many ways of turning this into a diagonal of 2 different colors. One way I would do it is by locking this layer, coming to my pen tool, putting it on one corner, and I have this snapping on. Click once, seeing it's making the line up to the next corner. Click. Saves you a lot of time when you have your smart guides turned on. Now I've just made this triangle, and now I can selected it, Now I can change the color. Let me do like a, it's probably gonna look terrible. Let's try that. Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, let's see more contrast there. Okay, so I'm going for a flag with a diagonal design. Okay, now I want some sort of symbol or some sort of icon that works between these two halves. These two halves should be symbolic. You know, maybe this is, again, if this is a flag of represents the ocean and a mountainside right next to the ocean for maybe some sort of sea, a city by the sea that has a mountain abutting next to the downtown, something like that. Who knows? I might lock that layer, make a new layer, and then use my pen tool. Let's see, what kind of shape would be good? You know, like maybe there was a UFO sighting, and and that's important for this city's history. So I'm going to make a UFO shape. So I'm using the pen tool. Kind of make this little arc here. I'm going to hold down Option, click on my last anchor point. Now I'm going to complete the shape. Lift this one up. Oops. Make it smaller. Maybe actually there was 3 UFO sightings, and that's represented by 3 UFOs. Okay. You know, it kind of works better if they're at a little more offset like that. So you're starting to see the process of how we're thinking through building these shapes and having them conceptually work with our design. Okay. You can add other colors, like here. Actually, may be nice to have something that adds a little bit more contrast. Maybe we can do. Actually, we'll just build off of this. I'll just use white. We're going to turn these into eyeballs by using the circle tool. Sometimes you have to zoom in to do well. I actually think I liked it better without the white. But it's trial and error, right? We're just thinking through different ways of using these color palettes. Don't use the very first ones that come to your mind. You might say, you know what, this kind of purple color, it's just not it, right? Maybe it needs to be more magenta. Probably not. Maybe like a more of a burgundy or something. So it's going to be trial and error. Any questions so far? Okay. We also, let's see, pathfinder tool. Okay. So another way to build shapes is by combining symbol shapes to make more complex shapes. For example, I'm going to lock all of these and make another new layer. Let's work on this flag. I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, circle tool. I'm going to make a circle. I'm going to quickly duplicate by holding down Option. You see my cursor changes when I hold down Option. If I hold down Option, I click and drag, it will duplicate the shape. Right now, these are four very simple circles. No big deal, right? But as they start overlapping and intersecting, some more interesting things can happen. Because these circles, even though they're the same color, we don't see the outline. But if I change a color, let's just make each one different. It's easier to see how they are overlapping and interacting with each other. Now, up on Window, come down to Pathfinder. So Window, Pathfinder. You'll get a window that looks like this. Let's move it over here. I probably should back up just a bit and mention that the way Illustrator is making these shapes, again, is through points and paths. You don't have to worry about this. If I go to view a paths view, it's showing this outline of all my shapes I've made. Let's go back up here. You can see these paths, these lines, are basically mathematically defined lines between certain points. So when shapes like this are overlapping, you'll start to notice, look at these other shapes in here. You have this kind of like fish shape that's made by these overlapping, kind of like an iron shape here, some sort of, I don't know what this in between shape is. This one, instead of using a pen tool trying to draw this shape here, we can use a pathfinder to add and subtract different shapes and create more complex shapes from something as simple as a group of circles. I'll exit this. So I'm going to click and drag and select these four circles. And then this is just going to take some experimentation. So the first option here is Unite. This makes it all one shape. Now there's not four circles. If I go back to my path view, this is just one solid shape that was created by the outline of all four of those circles. Let's undo that. The next one, minus front. So everything else gets subtracted, and now we're left with this shape with the other three circles subtracted from it. Sometimes, depending on your paths, they will not produce results. That could be something there. You can even move this around. One thing that will probably come in handy is to divide. So once I select all of these and divide them, I can separate each, and you can see as I hover over it, everything that was overlapped, it's now its own shape. Now you have to, they're still what's called grouped together. So if I click on them, you see they move all together. They're in a group. You can group objects and ungroup objects. I can right click and press ungroup. And now, look at this. Each of these shapes can be separated. So that's another way to possibly create something a more complicated shape that may just be a little bit time consuming to try to make manually with the pen tool. Okay. Everybody with me on Pathfinder? Okay. This, the UFO shape up here, I could have actually made this with two overlapping circles. A circle here that overlaps a little sliver with a circle above it, and then use a pathfinder, subtract the top and bottom, and I'm left with this sliver, kind of like Venn diagram piece in between. I could have made this exact same shape with two circles in the pathfinder. Also, regardless of whether or not you're using the pathfinder, it can still be very handy to group and ungroup objects. So instead of, let's say you're, actually let's go back up here. If I'm moving things around, but I want to move the kind of spaceship eyeballs all at the same time, this layer is locked, so I gotta find which layer it's on. There it is. If I select them and then right click and press group, now they'll move all together because they're grouped together. This might be an example where I use the align tool to get these circles. Say I want them perfectly aligned. Go back to line, and I'll distribute them horizontally. Now, let's say you have an even amount of objects, and they're a little bit off-centered here. You want them centered perfectly. If you don't have them in a group and you press align to center, look what it does. It aligns them all together on one. This is why you may want to use groups. So if I group them together, now they all function as one group. Now I can go to align to artboard, align it horizontally. Actually, sorry, it's not even artboard. It should be with this shape. So now I can select the two shapes, align, shape, center it, and center it. Now these four circles are centered perfectly within this yellow rectangle. Now obviously this looks terrible, but imagine you have this more complicated area or pattern, and you want it to basically crop it into maybe the shape of a flag. You can do that with clipping masks. So first off, I'm going to group this. So I'm selecting all of these. I'm going to press group. And now I'm going to make a rectangle the shape of my crop that I want. Let's just make this a little bit different colors so it's a little easier to see. This one is going to be the area that basically crops the pattern behind it. Now if I select both of these, right click, press make clipping mask. Now that pattern fits within side of that shape I just made. Okay? This may come in handy, especially if you have the shape of a flag. And let's say you're actually using some lines. It may be easier to make the lines. Let me add a stroke here. Say you're adding some stripes or some lines. It's easier to just use the line tool, which by the way I know we haven't really talked about, but it's over here. It's called line segment tool. And instead of trying to get this to line up perfectly, which you actually can't, because even if you put it right at the edge, the end of the line is still flat, and if you put it past it, you see it sticks out above. This is a great time to use a clipping mask. So I have these four lines. I'm going to select them, right click, group, and then I'm going to copy and paste this shape of this flag. So Command C or edit, copy, and then Command V. Now here's a problem. This one, it's still below the lines. You're going to want to arrange it to be above the lines to make that clipping mask. Okay, to do that, let me actually change the color so it's a little bit easier to see. It's keyboard shortcut Command right bracket to arrange up. Actually, no, because I put this on a bottom layer. I can't have this on the bottom layer because layer 7 has my lines. So it actually has to be on layer 7. Now I press paste, but I'm going to pretend that it's behind the lines still. So you want above the lines. So if you press Command and right bracket, eventually it will filter it up the order of the objects you have on that layer. Now that might be a little bit more complicated. Then once you have that, you can select all of these, right click, make clipping mask. Now it puts those lines inside the clipping mask. And they're perfectly aligned to the edge of this flag. You can go in and edit a clipping mask by double clicking on it. It'll open an isolation layer, and now I can click on this group and I can still move it around inside this clipping mask, and then just double click outside of it to return back to your artboard. I think that's enough for today. There's a few more tools that we'll go over on Wednesday. I just don't want to overload everybody with new stuff. So go ahead and use knowledge that you have hopefully gained so far, and start thinking about your the flags you are going to be designing and maybe what they represent. Again, this can be very kind of abstract, where it's a flag for your dorm room or a flag for your favorite foods. It really is kind of just something that represents something in your life that you can then be adding these shapes, using these colors in a conceptual way and symbolic way as flags that will have different types of symbolism and represent different types of identities for nations and cities and things like that.